Melbourne City and Macarthur FC both know their draws for the upcoming ACL Elite and ACL 2 campaigns. Now, these draws were painful to watch at the best of times because of the function and the structures of the competitions themselves.
Yeah.
The ACL 2 was all right. It's pretty simple. Obviously, you got the East and the West, and all the teams get drawn into their own pools. They have pot rankings, but unlike UEFA, where, in Europe, they have a club coefficient system. So every club, obviously you have to play regularly to get ranked on there, but every club has its own ranking in UEFA competitions. And because there's 3 of them and most of the clubs up there play regularly, you have a fairly reasonable distribution. However, in Asia, what they do is they essentially rank all the countries by their league ranking, and then you're just the 1, 2, 3, or 4 from that country in terms of how you finished last season. So you can get a couple of teams in some interesting pots and throw in some curveballs of, teams that are coming from nations where 1 or 2 teams, think of Scotland into like Singapore with Lion City Sailors, right? If you have 1 or 2 teams that are really good in Asia, but then the rest of the competition is poor, well, then that's going to affect their national league ranking as well. So in terms of the Bulls, they got, from my perspective, a pretty good draw. They were drawn against Beijing FC, which is the lowest ranked pot 1 team, and then also against Taipo FC from Hong Kong. And I believe, Jacob, correct me if I'm wrong, you're nodding, so I think we're on the right track here.
Stefan Mork's new side.
Stefan Mork's new club in Vietnam, Kong An Hanoi. So they should, for me, easily move out of that group. They had some tough opposition in that first pot. Which if I scroll back on my Twitter feed quickly enough, I can actually tell you who they were. I know Beijing, as the Chinese team, were definitely in 4th place. And then we had Pohang Steelers from Korea, Gamba Osaka from Japan, and Bangkok United from Thailand. So those 4 sides obviously draw Beijing, which is the lowest. And then Lion City Sailors, as I brought up, we saw that the damage that they cost Sydney FC last season. They're a pot 3 team, just by the virtue of the fact that Singapore is ranked number 9 in the East. So they managed to miss them in pot 3. So I think that's a pretty good result.
It's huge.
And kind of looking at almost Christian, like obviously Beijing is going to be a good team in a tough test, but those other 2 teams feel more like the AFC Cup run that the Bulls had a couple of years ago. And hopefully, obviously with the top 2 progressing, they should move out of this group.
Yeah, I expect Beijing to be a tough test. Where did they finish on the table last season heading into this season?
I know last season, but I think they're sitting 3rd at the moment because obviously China run alternate season. So I think they're doing pretty well in the CSL at the moment.
Because they've been always, this is probably going back a few years when Victory and Sydney were regulars in the ACL Elite, where Beijing Guoan, as they were known back then, which then known as Beijing FC now, they were in that competition a lot. So they have a lot of experience there. Obviously, a lot of player turnover since then, but they've got experience in these sort of competitions to test a side like Macarthur. So I think that'd be an interesting matchup. But those last 2 teams you mentioned, I agree with you. That should be a pretty sort of easy path for Macarthur to ease their way into the competition. We saw with the Mariners, I know a couple of seasons back in the ACL Elite, where I know it's very difficult to judge the 2 competitions. They're different in terms of the quality, but we saw with the Mariners how they got a few tough games to open up with, and from there it was very difficult for them to ease their way into the tournament and really, get a grip hold of it. So I think for Macarthur, that's a real advantage for them to really settle in, and you'd think that progress into the knockout rounds, and from there a real chance to potentially go all the way. So I think that's a very kind draw for Macarthur.
All right, so that's the simple one. Now, allow me a little bit of time to rant about the structure of the ACL Elite draw. So most people know we now have a league phase instead of the groups in the ACL Elite, which is, in theory, I believe is actually a pretty cool way to do it, especially in this part of the world where definitely Australians are not very familiar with other teams. At least we get 8 different Asian teams that we get to go back and forth with and learn about. And we still get 4 games at home, and it's, 8 out of the 12 teams progress to the knockout. So it's a relatively cool way, I think, to go in, but the mechanisms of which the draw takes place is ridiculous in Asia. So if you compare it to the European Champions League, what do we have? Do we have like 32 teams or something in the league phase for the Champions League?
36
Way
now.
too many. Way too many.
36. So it's absolutely massive. And the reason why that's important is obviously because all those teams come from lots of different countries. So The Champions League in Europe has a country protection rule that says you can't play against other teams from your country in the league phase, which, again, in theory, makes a lot of sense. And in a competition that big with so many entrants from different countries, it works quite well. However, in Asia, it is fundamentally ridiculous to include that rule in the group, in the league phase of the ACL Elite, because not only do we split off into East and West, so you're cutting the country list in half, we're playing a league phase of 12 teams in which 9 of them come from just 3 nations.
Yeah.
And so you know, there's 3 Japanese teams, there's 3 South Korean teams, and there's 3 Chinese teams. And how that works out in a 12-team draw is just silly because, you know, theoretically, yeah, you could play a Japanese team here, a Korean team there, a Chinese team there. But I don't know whether it's to try and simplify the draw happening on the screen in front of you or just to make it easier on the computer or whatever. But the way they do it is instead drawing you into a fixture list, they draw you into draw pots, I think is what they call them. And they basically say 3 groups of 4 draw pots. And then if all the teams you get drawn against in that pot, you don't play and you play everyone else. And the country protection is on those pots. So obviously all the teams from the same country have to be drawn in the same pot, because if they're drawn in a different pot, they play each other, which they can't. So you get all Chinese teams in one, all the South Korean teams in another, and all the Japanese teams in the third. And then it's just a roll of the dice for Buriram United from Thailand, Johor Darul from Malaysia, and Melbourne City in Australia in terms of which of those trio of teams from one country that you don't play in the league phase. All those 3 teams I just mentioned, you're guaranteed to play each other no matter what happens. And you can't pick one Japan, one Korea, one China. You miss 3 from one, and it just so happened that Melbourne City rolled China, which is, you know, not as good as missing Japan. It kind of just is what it is. But it means you're guaranteed to then play 3 Japanese teams and 3 South Korean teams. So Shanghai Port, Kevin Muscat won't be making another meeting with an Australian team. Shanghai Shenhua and Chengdu, the Chinese teams, we won't see them on Australian shores for sure, and Melbourne City will not play them. They'll play Buriram United from Thailand, Johor Darul in Malaysia, Sanfrecce Hiroshima, who of course have been to Australia in the last 12 months, and Gangwon FC from Korea. All those games will be at home. We might, even if we're lucky, finally get a Tolgay Arslan return visit. He's still at Sanfrecce, although I believe he's struggling with a little injury.
Unless he gets suspended again.
Or he gets suspended again. And then Vissel Kobe from Japan, Ulsan Hyundai from Korea, FC Seoul from Korea, and Makita Zelvia, which is Mitch Duke's side, of course, in Japan, will be the away game. So, Jacob, all that to say, the ACL Elite draw is a little bit ridiculous. It kind of just is what it is, and Melbourne Victory have 8 games of football to play.
You mean City?
City, yeah.
I would be
Victory.
surprised if Victory had made the ACL Elite not winning the championship, but no. Yeah, there's 8 games to play, 4 home, 4 away. Make the best of it, guys. And you know, you cannot do worse than the Mariners did, number 1. So that's always the positive heading in. But there's a decent opportunity here with just regards to, you know, City. I mean, you spoke about at length during the season, Lockie, that you hoped it was going to be, you know, hopefully somebody like a Melbourne City that was going to grab that ACL Elite spot, because they seem to, you know, have that ability to put a good squad together, and they've got those resources to be able to support them on, you know, this sort of a venture and in this tournament. So, you know, it's probably a good sign that they're the ones that did actually end up with that spot at the end of it all anyway. But it's still going to be a tough ask, because like you said, they've got those 3 Japanese sides that they're going to have to face, which is, you know, they're arguably the top East Asian club league. So, you know, that's really difficult. But then, you know, you are missing Shanghai Port and Shanghai Shenhua, who are 2 of the best teams in Asia anyway. Yep. So, you know, while it would be nice to miss Japan, you have missed 2 dangerous sides there in China. And, you know, yeah, it's 8 games of football there. And yeah, you've just got to do better than the Mariners did at the very least. I'd expect them to potentially get a couple of wins in here, right? I mean, Buriram United and Johor Darul are obviously the ones that you look at and you go, those are big opportunities.
And they got them at home, which is good.
Yeah, playing at home against the 2 probably weakest sides of the 8 that they have to face. There's a really good opportunity to get yourself 6 points there and you know, at least have a good showing. And you know, with the squad that City have and the style of football that they play, I think that they can, you know, they can scrape some results here and there against some of those stronger sides as well. So it's going to be fascinating to see how they approach it and sort of the way they go about things, and when each Do we? I don't think we know any of the dates of the games, do we? So
we do. We do.
Oh, we do. Okay.
Round number 2 coming up.
There you go. Go straight into it.
So here's my extra complaint, and I've actually talked to Melbourne City about this, and they are asking the AFC for this to be changed. So the match day dates have been locked in forever. It's either the Tuesday or the Wednesday of certain dates throughout September, October, November, December, and then February after the break. The last 2 rounds are played in the new year. However, the kickoff times that have been assigned to these games is utterly ridiculous. Melbourne City, their first game is at home to San Frecce on the 16th of September. Kickoff is 5:45 p.m. local time.
Good one. Yeah.
And the following 2 games against Buriram and Johor are 6:45 kickoffs, both on Tuesdays. And then the final game against Gangwon to close out the group, Melbourne City play on a Wednesday at 9 p.m. kickoff. Now, as I said, Melbourne City have gone and they've asked for this to be changed, and we'll see what happens. But 5:45, we already struggle for crowds for these kind of midweek fixtures in Australia. You're going to get absolutely nobody turning up for a 5:45 kickoff, which is a shame. But Christian, look, I am very optimistic actually about Melbourne City's chances. I think they absolutely should progress. We're looking at around 10 or 11 points to progress through to the next stage, which they should be able to do. Hopefully, Buriram and Johor, again, they can get those results. Gangwon, I'm looking at another, pretty good tussle at home. And then you just got to get something away against one of those sides, and then you're pretty close to the line.
I think I'm going to be the pessimist here. I don't see City going through.
No.
Are you that confident? Are you confident that they'll go through? You reckon they'll get
I wouldn't say confident, but definitely significantly more faith than the Mariners last week.
Mariners, yeah.
That goes without saying. I'm not saying that.
I think they're more likely than not to qualify for the knockouts.
Yeah, I can see that. It's going to be close. I mean, it's going to be tearing towards like that sort of 7th to 9th position, I reckon. So lingering in there, whether they make it or not. And obviously, you followed City more than we all did last season, Lockie. Following Melbourne City and reports and going to press conferences, etc. Do you think City, for this upcoming season, do they have the depth to compete in both the A-League and this ACL Elite now, or will they have to be in a position where they have to prioritise one or the other?
Well, no. Look, I don't think they're going to be able to do the Mariners and win both. I think that was a real unicorn that year, and that should never be expected to happen again. Obviously, people know nowadays in the A-League, you don't have to win the regular season to win the championship. And I think some of those concessions will be made. Obviously, there's a lot of money on offer, so hopefully that priority goes towards the ACL Elite, especially early, because we play. I think it's 2 match days before the A-League season even starts. In fact, I can look. Yeah, it is 2. So hopefully that you get even 4 points in those first 2 games. It sets you up really nicely, and then you can hopefully earn qualification. I think they will obviously struggle in the A-League as the result. However, they haven't lost too many players. Obviously Tilio is a big blow who they're going to have to try and replace, but we're going to. We've talked about their transfers throughout the season. They've still got a lot of that solid core there, and we've seen the quality that their academy has coming through. So I think they've got enough depth when they need it to be able to stay alive in both competitions. Let's say that.
I think the one disadvantage about having one spot, right, is, for example, you're going to go into this campaign with the ACL Elite, the A-League. Melbourne City, for example, if they're fighting to make the top 8 for the ACL Elite and they're, I don't know, that might hamper their chances of competing for the championship, right? And you get these different Australian clubs in the ACL Elite year in, year out. I think I said this a couple of months back, where this is my one concern about, the ACL Elite for Australian clubs is we're not going to have the these consistent clubs competing in it year in, year out, where you've got Melbourne City in it, for example, for 2 to 3 years, where they've got that experience under their belt. Whereas now we're sort of switching and changing to City, the Mariners, Victory, the Wanderers. That's my only concern with that one sole spot for this ACL Elite, where you just love to see a big club be in this competition for 2, 3, 4 seasons, and just be familiarize themselves in the competition to get that experience, that know-how to how to actually win these games. Because against these types of opposition, you need to be in this competition for, a few seasons, like Shanghai Port, like some of these clubs who have been there, done that. That's always been my one concern about it.
And you know what we do about that, Christian?
Win it.
And improve the coefficient.
Yeah,
that's it.
For
That's
the
it.
coefficient.
The keyword.
Absolutely. So let me give you a little coefficient update just before we sign off from Asia. We finished last season in 5th in the East, that is. We've actually slipped down to 6th on just the tick over of the new season because we lost the 2016 numbers where Melbourne Victory and Sydney FC both got out of the groups and then lost in the first knockout stage, if I'm not mistaken. So that knocked us down a little bit. But we're only a point and a half behind Malaysia, which also have the same qualification as us, one in the Elite and then one in ACL 2. And then there's China and Thailand who are another 10 points or so ahead. That it's unlikely, but it's not impossible to catch one of those two in this window, which would be, in this calendar year, which would be absolutely massive because that would give us an uptick of an extra qualifier into the ACL Elite. And then if you lose that, you're into the ACL 2 anyway. So go on City, have a good run. Bulls have to be strong in the ACL 2 as well. Get to another quarterfinal or a semi-final. And who knows if one of those two nations have a big year. And also China and Thailand both lose a lot of points next year. So if not this year, next year, we've got to be jumping one of those two nations. For me.
And are the points different between the ACL 2 and the ACL Elite? So if you win a game, the actual points you get, they're different. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't looked into it enough to know whether you'd rather have like an average team in the Elite or a really good team in the ACL.
I thought you were. You were over this, Lockie.
Yeah, this is your thing.
Look, Sydney FC did very well last year. They carried the Mariners by getting to a semi-final. So I think somewhere around a quarterfinal, semi-final in the ACL 2, maybe a roundabouts getting out of the league stage in the ACL Elite. Something like that is maybe the equivalent.
Yeah.
Okay.